with other groups also participating, engaging in fraternal discussions, including WIN. And we are being asked by the conference here, with our comrades here from Greece, from Romania, from Turkey, from Italy, and several other countries too. And we want to say, of course, to give our solidarity for the campaign. We need to have international action in support of the Palestinian people against the monstrous slaughter that they're experiencing now from the Israeli regime. But we also have passed a resolution of solidarity, which I think this whole meeting, whole WIN meeting will do, solidarity with the 3 comrades from Newham, which is the area in London where I live, where 3 comrades have been arrested on the most monstrous fit-up charges, believe it or not, of racial harassment in relation to a demonstration that took place in Newham against the Newham Council, which was about to pass a monstrous budget of harsh cuts. This is a Labour mayor and a Labour administration, and they were accused, of course, of heckling the councillors, which is their democratic right to do. But this was twisted into a monstrous libelous charge of anti-Semitic hissing, in fact. So I think those comrades, they were arrested at midnight, they were kept in custody 24 hours. They experienced great hardship. 2 of the comrades are now homeless for reasons which I won't go into now. But the whole conference expresses solidarity. So I think they'll express their support in time-honored way.
Thank you. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, comrades from Athens. Welcome, welcome all in solidarity with the Palestinian struggle. Welcome to how trade unions fought apartheid and how we can all come together and fight the genocide in Gaza. It's been a critical year. We have so many people that have come from oppressed backgrounds, and we understand the attitude of the imperialists have towards the global south. So we know that brutality, slavery, colonialism, and apartheid go hand in hand. The human suffering that is being inflicted on the Palestinian people is a legacy that has come from many struggles, including the apartheid system in South Africa. In fact, it was the South Africans like Ronnie Castle that coined the term in Palestine that this was an apartheid state, Israel state. So our agenda is going to slightly change because we can see some of our key speakers, the way we had organized for them to start. We wanted to put the Americans first in terms of the time difference. But because they are not here, I will ask my comrades that have joined us to get us going so that we can, they'll catch up with us so we can get the gist of why we're here and to understand what sort of actions have taken place with regards to the anti-apartheid movements in relation to trade unions across the world. So without further ado, I will ask David Hampson to get us started off as one of the veterans of the anti-apartheid trade union movements. Thank you, David. Would you like to come in? Amandla.
Apparently my Amandla was muted. Amandla.
Away too.
Okay. Thank you, comrades. Thank you, Jabu, for that warm greeting. Comrades, let's pass our mind back before we look forward again. In the 1970s and 80s, we had one of the most formidable movements the world has ever seen, compared in a sense only as strong or even greater than the anti-slavery movement, with much of the same theme: to be able to end the oppression of Black people in South Africa through united action across the world based on the labor movement and through solidarity actions which have taken place quite spectacularly by Liverpool dockers, by workers in the Midlands and the motor industry, by workers in different ports around the world, and most notably by the ILW in 1984, when those comrades took action and refused to unload a cargo of South African cargo from a ship. And despite the law, despite the police, despite every action that was taken against them, stood fast for 11 days. And really, that was the launch of the mass anti-apartheid movement in the United States, something which we honor them to this very day. Comrades from South Africa, it's not been a one-sided solidarity. The comrades in Durban and the docks in 2008 took action to stop the unloading of arms for the Mugabe regime at the time when the trade union movement was being bitterly oppressed in that country. Comrades, we are wanting to build in the same way as before, to be able to build as mighty or a bigger movement than we had in the anti-apartheid movement, picking up the line of action which then took place, taking forward, and you'll hear the testimonies of comrades about how that was done, using every possible action to stop this war machine, which is in front of our eyes, destroying whole peoples, and to be able to bring that to a halt and to be able to offer the Palestinian oppressed people an alternative view around the world, that they do not stand alone, that there are friends, there are activists, there's solidarity out there. We will know, they will know that as the action has been taken and the international course of justice and the like, that the labor movement is alive, well, and prepared to take action. Out of this movement, we hope to see the rise of action groups and activities to be able to consolidate the call which is now being made, to develop international trade union solidarity with the exploited and the oppressed, to be able to remember occasions like, for instance, Clover Dairies, one of the most noted dairies in South Africa, has been bought out by a Zionist company. Immediately, the workers there were retrenched. We are resisting in South Africa, elsewhere in the world, through our trade union action and in every possible means to bring this war to an end and to be able to let the Palestinian people live in peace and development. Thanks so much. Amandla.
Thank you, David, for that setting us off comprehensive talk about how collective action was instrumental in ending apartheid in terms of the solidarity that was shown across the world. I was a young girl when my mother and her comrades would go to several marches anti-apartheid. The movement that was led by Trevor Huddleston in England was quite powerful then. But the difference that we had then was that the Labour Party of that time was quite open about were in support of the struggle in South Africa. The challenges are different now, where we see politicians like Biden, who we regard as on the left in terms of how the political spectrum is seen, but we have seen their unwavering support for the Israeli action. So we'd like to invite another comrade from South Africa, from the Mao days and subsequently NUMSA, which took over from Mao. I'd like to invite, I see Woody is here, Woody Aaron. Woody Aaron, would you like to come in and talk about the struggles that you engaged in terms of the anti-apartheid trade union movement in South Africa? Thank you. Woody, are you still here? Woody Aaron.
Mute, please.
Woody, you're on mute.
Unmute. Okay, hi. Yeah, okay, let me just start again very quickly. Yeah, thanks, Jabu, for that introduction. And yeah, and greetings to all comrades that have actually joined this webinar and this session on building solidarity with Palestine. I just want to point out very briefly, following on what David has said, is that yes, I think we've seen how the trade union movement has evolved in South Africa, and I think we go back to the early industrial, but in fact pre-industrial period actually, with you had all forms of indentured labor coming in Natal, and then the exploitation of the mass and the broader black and amongst African working class, and then of course you had the slaves that were brought into Cape Town. So there was this whole there was a way to sort of coalesce and bring all these different groups together to actually and build some strong sort of resistance against the colonialism and then subsequently the apartheid regime. Now, I think in the trade union movement, and I think it sort of evolved through different periods and different times. Commensurate with the kind of industrial development that we had in the country. So starting from mining and into industrial development like manufacturing and so on. And you see the movement evolve along those, in a very symmetrical way with the development of the country's sort of political economy. But it did come, I think, in the 70s, and the unions started to get and they fought very hard because black workers were excluded from labor legislation and so on. But there used to be lots of strikes, and I think eventually the state and the employers and the state introduced some reforms to labor legislation, and I think that set the platform for some of the unions to actually consolidate and build themselves, and by doing that, and I think but the principles that they established in the internal union democracy based on principles of worker control and accountability and mandates and so on, you had a sort of what was building up when it started to blossom was a very, and I think it gave rise to a very powerful trade union movement subsequently in the country. But the coalition, and it's not the unions alone that could end apartheid, and I think both forces inside and outside of the country were important for the kind of pressure they put on the apartheid regime. But I think the important thing was that in around, well, I think it was 1983, and the launch of the UDF, and what you saw was a coalition of forces, the unions included, and some actually became part and formally joined the UDF, but others felt that they're not going to compromise on the kind of political independence, but they supported mass struggle, they supported mass campaigns, and I think this was very powerful, and I think we're seeing a very similar kind of thing that's actually unfolding in Palestine now. So it's not as if Palestine doesn't have coalition. In fact, I think they really have some very strong coalition movements that are beginning to build and beginning to engage in struggle. In spite of all the kind of horrific bombings and the kind of mass destruction that's going on, I think it's you're seeing a very powerful group and a very powerful mass of people united under broad coalitions. And I think that's a good sign. So it's very similar to what we kind of had here. And of course, with the UDF in 1983, and at that stage, it was the Federation of South African Trade Unions. And we saw strong union community power, and there was strong union community power that was building. Yeah, thanks, Jabu.
Thank you, Mr. Aaron, for your testimony. Yes, the times of the Federation of South African Trade Union is very dear to me, because I remember this around the time the Mpangeni branches were formed, and they were mobilizing the areas which had been unionized in terms of the South African struggle. Thank you so much for your contribution. I can see that we've been joined by our American comrades. Newt is here. I would just say a quick sort of background in terms of the American struggle. In 1994, Larry White and his co-workers in International Longshore and the Warehouse Union, ILW, Local 10, refused to unload goods shipped from South Africa in solidarity with the anti-apartheid in South Africa. This boycott at the San Francisco pier, which lasted close to 11 days. Newt is a member of the ILW, and he is also the nephew of Huey P. Newton, the founder of the Black Panther movement in America. If Newt is here, Newt, would you like to come in, please?
Hey, my apologies. As you can see, we're in what we call ground zero of Local 10 San Francisco Dispatch Hall. It's our fellow dispatchers all here. And that's what's going on this morning. A lot going on
Solidarity.
here. Yeah, I can show you guys what our local hall looks like. You can see people out there to get jobs. So we're in the middle of that right now. At 8 o'clock is a little bit better, but right now we're gearing up for the night side. So my apologies. I'm just getting in. So I don't know what I missed. Can somebody catch me up?
Yeah, well, we've just had David Hampson, who's giving us the background of the struggle in South Africa, how the labor trade unions in South Africa were waging the struggle against apartheid in terms of mobilizing the workforce and various actions that took place, including strike actions. I think we will just knit in with it with Woody, who then also added to that in terms of the organization and the forming of broader organizations like FOSATU, which was later COSATU, how they mobilized and joined with civic organizations to actually end the apartheid. I think I'm summing it up well, but we will go back to the discussion later if you are still available. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So one thing that and my mentor, Big Brother Jack Heyman is on here. I see him. David Hensley, we worked with him also. He came to the local. But one thing that Oakland did as a whole was there was a Zim ship here, and I don't know if anybody saw the coverage in the international news, but we had protesters out there. It was not led by the ILWU, but there were some of us that were out there. It was a military cargo ship, and our local people here protested that ship. And when the ship tried to leave, people jumped on the ship. It was quite a sight to see. They took those people off of the ship at a nearby island here, but then that ship went up north to Washington State, and Washington State protested that ship as well. So what we've been doing here is advocating for no Zim ships, no ships that are going into the Gaza Strip, Palestine, Israel, formerly known as Palestine. And that's where we are right now. So whatever we can do to assist the movement, we'd like to put that together.
Thank you, Newt. I guess Jack would also come in to really kind of elaborate on how the historical struggle took place. And we also would like to add the fact that you came to South Africa in January last year for the 50-year celebration of the 1973 strikes that took place in South Africa in protest against low wages in our factories in Durban, South Africa. Would you like to just kind of talk about your experience with that visit, Newt?
Is that
Jabu, are you addressing that to me, Jack?
Yes.
Or
No, I was saying for Newt before he goes, if he wants to just say how it was to be in South Africa in terms of the kind of links that we are making as international what you call workers. How did you find the visit in South Africa?
I felt that was an amazing experience for me personally, but I feel like it was a necessary thing for people like myself and other union members and or people that want to make an impact on communities to have that solidarity, grow that solidarity, not just have a name behind a title, but actually have some sense of knowing who the people are and knowing
Yes.
common struggles that we all have and can work together. I felt like that was something that should be done, in my opinion, at least once a year. Maybe that's asking much. Once every 2 years, we should have some conference in some country where union people get together and talk about union issues, and also community people get together and talk about community issues. I don't think it should stop there. For me personally, I really felt like I understood the spirit of the struggle in South Africa. Coming from where I come from, there are a lot of parallels with that apartheid state. The United States is not labeled as an apartheid, but my people have come under apartheid type rule since before my gene line can even be traced. So we understand and identify with that. And when it comes to the actual work issues, I felt like that was something that had to be done. And we can only grow from that, right? So with that, we have things like what we have here today. And we can actually grow an international type network of solidarity where, as people in Gaza Strip need help right now, I know this comrade in Gaza Strip, let us do what we can to help you, and vice versa. I think that is the beginning of real change.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Newt, for your solidarity. And we also always look at our American brothers, sisters struggle and see it as our struggle. We are still concerned about the plight of Abu Mahmoud Jamal, and we would keep on fighting for those struggles in the US. Can I also ask Jack to come in and contribute? Because I'm aware that the time strains in the US are quite critical for you guys. Would you like to come in, Jack?
yeah, sure. I'd love to contribute. So one of the important things that Newt and I were able to do during the ILW trip to South Africa was meet with the leadership of the largest union in that country, the metal workers. And specifically, we went there to request that the National Association of Metal Workers of South Africa participate in an international campaign to free Mumia Abu-Jamal. And what came out of our meeting with them was really stunning. They committed to writing a letter to the judge calling for Mumia's freedom, that he'd been framed, that they do an action in South Africa, a protest at the U.S. Embassy there. And beyond that, Irvin Jim, the General Secretary, did a video that was put up on the internet to encourage unions around the world to become involved in the case to free Mumia Abu-Jamal. And in fact, shortly after we left, NUMSA had a mass demonstration in front of the U.S. Embassy to demand freedom for Mumia Abu-Jamal. And I would say that kind of international coordination with unions like NUMSA, I don't know if Retusa, the dockworkers union from Durban, is in this conversation, but they should be. And what we need to do is exactly what Newt and I were able to do with Irvin Jim and the national office bearers of NUMSA, which is to not just talk about solidarity, but concretely take action. That's, this is a genocidal war going on. And we had unions that took actions in previous times against Zionist oppression, but now there tends to be some kind of trade union bureaucratic control over a lot of these unions that aren't coming forward when they should be. So I don't know. I guess I'll leave it at there, because I thought this was going to be a meeting about how we can coordinate international actions. They certainly desperately need that right now. The Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions has called for an international campaign. And more recently, Greg Dropkin, who's in on this conversation from Liverpool, has been trying to be sort of a labor center at his labornet.net in out of Liverpool, calling for workers around the world at the point of production to stop work. And I think that's something we need to focus on if anything is going to come out of this meeting. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Jack, for refocusing us on the purpose of this meeting. I understand that the ILW had a rally that was also calling for a ceasefire. The ceasefire movement is growing in its potential. Here in England, I am one of the 10 councillors in my local area, Oxford, who resigned over the statement made by our Labour leader then, Starmer. But we are also very concerned about the plight of the people, the Palestinian people, in terms of what they are facing currently as news of a famine are coming through, and the fact that young children and women are struggling and they are starving. I would like to bring in Anna Majavu Wesson, who's been to Gaza and has worked in West Bank for a couple of years. Anna, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you, Comrade Jabu. Hello, everybody. Yes, so I've just been asked to speak very briefly on the situation in Palestine with regards to journalism. I lived and worked in Palestine for 3 years as a media activist, but reporting for the pro-Palestine press, like Electronic Intifada, and working with the popular committees of Palestinians who were campaigning against the apartheid war. I mean, hello?
Yeah, go on, Anna.
Sorry. So well, the first thing is that there are no international media activists in Gaza. They were all banned by Israel in 2003, 21 years ago. That was shortly after Israel bulldozed Rachel Corrie, who was an American activist with the International Solidarity Movement. So she died, and from the bulldozer, she was killed. And after that, they then closed the Gaza Strip to all international activists, media activists, and any journalist who wasn't accredited by the Israeli army. And that's the situation now. So this also leaves the Palestinian journalists wide open to targeted assassinations by Israel, because they're the only journalists there. So they're very easy to identify. Since the latest invasion began in October, which has since turned into a genocide, 132 Palestinian journalists have been killed, and 80 have been injured. 173 media offices have been destroyed. As you know, Israel has killed 55 Palestinian journalists between 2000 and 2022. So they are always killing Palestinian journalists, but now they've taken it to another level. There was a building in Gaza called Press House Palestine, a very, very wonderful place. It was a simple building, but set up by Palestinian journalists in 2013 as a hub for all journalists and media activists. So you can see from that, there's not this distinction that you get in the Western media, where the Western media keep themselves very separate from media activists. In Palestine, everybody was welcome in Press House in Gaza. Right? Graduates were welcome there, poets, intellectuals, anybody who had an interest in making some kind of media about Palestine. So that was also bombed. And then, of course, Bilal Jadallah, one of the founders, was targeted while he was out driving in November 2023, and he was assassinated. So the Palestinians do have a journalists union. Palestinian journalists do have a journalists union called the Palestinian Journalists Syndicate. Their approach to the international mainstream media has been to condemn them for enabling the genocide. So some of the things they've pointed out recently is that Western media coverage remains biased towards Israel. In fact, it provides the state of Israel with the journalistic cover and justification to continue committing war crimes in Gaza. Some examples of this, when the Israeli and US governments suggested, without any evidence, that the Palestinian Health Ministry is inflating the number of Palestinians killed in Gaza, Western news agencies uncritically adopted this. And so then they've cast doubt on those figures ever since. They use dehumanizing language when referring to Palestinians. That's something else that the Palestinian Journalists Syndicate has condemned. And another thing that they've condemned is that Israel has repeatedly cut off all the internet and phone services in Gaza. So people in Gaza go for days without being able to transmit, evidence and coverage of the Israeli genocide to the rest of the world. So the Palestinian Journalists Syndicate, they've called on all journalists, trade unions, and news agencies around the world to publicly condemn the specific targeting of Palestinian journalists and take all possible measures to support Palestinian journalists. I mean, for me, most of the media activists I met in Palestine 20 years ago have either been shot at, injured, and crippled from being shot in the spine, or they've been killed. Their siblings and their family members have been murdered by Israelis in assassinations. The children who were 3 years old then, most of them are in prison now. They're in detention without trial. A good film to watch, and you've probably watched it already, is the 2012 movie called 5 Broken Cameras, made by Imad Bonat of Belain Village. It was actually the Oscar nominee in the documentary category that year. So it tells the story of the kind of targeting of media activists, journalists, and ordinary Palestinians that Israel carries out. So ideally, journalists around the world should not separate themselves from their Palestinian colleagues. They should be thinking of ways to support them practically. And this would require mainstream journalists to start actually writing seriously in support of the Palestinian boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign. So that the aim of journalists should be making ourselves useful as professionals in our field in the Palestinian anti-apartheid struggle. This is unlikely to happen because the Western media itself needs to decolonize, needs to be made to decolonize. And there's no formal process. There's no recognition even that it needs to decolonize. So it's hardly likely to stand with the Palestinian journalists, which means it will be up to other unions, non-journalist unions, unions of other workers, to stand side by side with the Palestinian journalists. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for that testimony about your time in Palestine, but also for the call out for the unions to actually coordinate action with regards to defending journalists. I would even extend it further to the health workers and all the people that are under attack from the Israeli, I would definitely say terrorist regime, from the way that they have behaved. We have seen a bold action taken by South Africa in terms of the call for the ICJ to intervene in this conflict. An interesting development where what you call Naledi Mandisa Pandor, our foreign minister, said. They were talking about the fact that aid is not getting to the Palestinians, and she suggested that the Western armies, Biden's army or British armies, assist the UN in taking aid to the Palestinian people. I don't think that went down well. We are experiencing a really aggressive ideology in terms of the Palestinian plight. I understand that our plight as South Africans was the interest in the exploitative labor that they had on the, with the South African workers, but apparently with the Palestinians, they absolutely they're unhinged. They don't care what they're doing, and we have seen solidarity, but we need a coordinated action where our solidarities can intensify in terms of the BDS, the boycott. So now I can see that Pakis Ntimotse is now ready, the General Secretary of Retusa. Retusa was also instrumental in refusing to load the Israeli Zim ship. Paki, are you ready? Ntimotse?
Yes, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Welcome, comrade.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for the opportunity. And I'm not sure if I'll say good morning or good afternoon or good evening to everybody around the world. And thanks for the opportunity that you provided us. As a trade union in South Africa, especially that organized in the sector of maritime, where majority of goods are coming via the Durban port. We were of the view that today we are coming here only to contribute into the position or any other campaigns that the organization is going to put forward, so that we can put our voice forward. As a trade union, we want to thank the whole world for giving us an opportunity just to say a few things about the struggle of the Gazanian people or the Palestinian people. We as a Retusa are particularly privileged to have you as our allies in organizing for workers. And at this critical juncture of human history, we are immensely thrilled that we can engage with like-minded organizations across the board, borders and oceans. The ongoing dehumanization in the Palestinian goes so much against the progress we've made in being made in the world, the image and being world in the world. It goes against the values we have fought for in dismantling the apartheid. It goes against the cohesion efforts we dismantled in the end of the Cold War. Israel is explicitly showing the world that it has not created internal empathy from lessons learned from the persecution of Jews. And as such, it is showing that impunity rules as a policy in their dealings with the Palestinians. Therefore, I believe it is overdue, even within this fresh conflict, to start imagining bolder ways of aiding the Palestinian people's struggle. We need to put pressure on pro-Palestinian leaders within our government and institution to call for immediate permanent ceasefire. To us, that one is very critical. Putting pressure on multinational businesses trading within Israel, because those are the companies that are providing Israel with all these necessary amenities to go and deal with the Palestinian people. We call on dock workers to once again refuse to offload containers ship carrying arms to Israel. This is what we wanted, like we have done with the Zimbabwean cargo ship that was in, I think it was some few years back. when the workers in this maritime sector, they refused totally. And the employer could not force them to do that. They could not force the workers when the workers were saying. So if again we are serious about this, it is our call as a retuser to say to the world, can we then refuse to offload all those ships or to dock all those ships that are carrying weapons that are destined for the Israel, to kill innocent children and women in Palestine. We're lobbying for establishment of dedicated hostage trade overseer bodies. This absence of all these and other binding measures has incentivized Israel to respond disproportionately and risks masking truth to whether they ever had grounds for weeding out Hamas. Comrades, the Israel issue also risks the creating appetite for other countries to flare against neighbors. As the Ukraine-Russian conflict preceded the Israel conflict, we are really working against time and hope this rigorous engagement bear fruit sooner rather than later. We call upon all countries to unite against the oppression of the Palestinian people. We wanted, as an organization, we've already started engaging some of the organization in South Africa. We had a meeting with other comrades, but the difficult part, comrades, which is very difficult in South Africa, the trade union in South Africa are becoming weak. The problem that created the whole issue of the trade union to be very weak is the fact that the trade union now, they concentrating more on investment. And the investment, this investment and the companies that invest into trade union, they only dictate as to how the trade union has to conduct themselves and how they have to deal with the issue of workers. It's very difficult if you campaign and want certain organization to join you. I'll make typical example with Transnet. In the Transnet, the majority trade union there is UNTU. And UNTU don't want any trade union to go into that space because they know that they are a sweetheart union to the employer. Whatever the Transnet says, it goes. Look at the privatization of the ports as we speak. There was not the union that stood up and say, this is wrong and we have to fight it. Because the person or the union which is it's in majority in that space is the one that which is a sweetheart union. So it's very difficult now to operate, except the NUMSA that we spoke about earlier, that can occupy a space. But when it comes to certain sectors, it's very difficult for NUMSA to intervene or to go into the space. We have arranged a meeting with NUMSA, the provincial here in Durban, specifically to deal with the issue of Israel, because we wanted them to invite us when they went into campaigning or staging the protest in the US Embassy. But they in the last minute, everything they've never been coordinated correctly. But this time around, I've had some meetings with other partners and the other trade unions, so that we can start waging this war against the Israel to defend the interest of the Palestinian. I thank you, Comrade Jabu, and
thank you, Comrade Bakis. Thank you for going into the difficulties that you face in terms of the unions of today, in terms of bureaucracy. When we look at the historical unions, the issues were different then, because I feel the membership really controlled the way that the unions were able to take actions. I'll be opening this to the audiences now, but I'd like you to take notice of the actions that have been taken across the world historically and what is happening now. Obviously, the RETUSA, South African Transport Unions, support statement of the IFL-CIO action to stop the war in Gaza is very important in terms of the solidarity and forging of the partnerships across the world. We need to keep this type of action going. We've got the Indian dock workers who were mobilized against the Israeli war machine. We had the Durban Satao solidarity with the Zimbabwean workers in 2008, April. Of course, the San Francisco anti-apartheid solidarity in 1984. That was really important as a historical win for the anti-apartheid movement. We had spoken to Moses Maegi, so he was supposed to be here today, but unfortunately, he has problems with Eastern Cape. Internet is down. But the Sisters of the Long March for Mau were very significant against the apartheid regime in South Africa. But also going to the UK, the Liverpool Dockers, they paralyzed the nuclear trade in 1987 with regards to the apartheid regime. But also we had a very significant dance strike in Ireland, who were really significant in terms of achieving banning of South African imports. So we would really like to open the discussion to the audience just to make contributions. So if you want to make contributions in terms of what can be done going forward in terms of fighting the genocide and the ethnic cleansing in Gaza and the West Bank by the Israeli racist regime. Can I see a show of hands? Okay, I can see Finba. Come in, Finba. Thank you.
Hello, comrades. I want to thank you, Jabu, for organising this meeting and for turning the focus towards trade union action. And in addition to the actions that you've already mentioned, such as the Indian workers in the ports, we should note that the civil servants in Brussels recently...
Greg, can I ask you to mute, please? Pam, can you mute them, please?
No.
Yeah, thank you.
Civil servants in Brussels recently took action outside the offices of the European Commission. So the action of trade union nature is going on, and that's going to be the resolution of the problem when unions take action. But I want to say a couple of words, which Jabu referred to, about a strike in Dublin that took place in the worst times of the apartheid regime in Africa. Unfortunately, the shop steward at that time, Karen Guerin, we had hoped would address this meeting, which is unable to attend. So what happened then, when apartheid was in full force in South Africa, was a group of workers, 11 very young workers, average age maybe 20, refused to handle goods from South Africa in accordance with the union's directive from a conference. That strike, the workers involved in that, the initial people who took action were suspended, and the strike then took place, which lasted a long time. But that strike had an immense effect. That trade union action had an immense effect. The workers then went to South Africa. They met Bishop Tutu and had discussions there. When Nelson Mandela, after his release, came to Dublin, he met the workers. And there's a lot of lessons for us all there that action can have an effect in issues of that nature. So Ireland is a small country, but nonetheless, that action had a significant effect in the struggle against apartheid. And that strike, the shop was called Dunn Stores. And the union that we're members of was the Irish Distributive Workers Union, IDATU, as it was known. There was another action which also took place around the time of the apartheid regime. This took place in Ireland. The Dublin Council of Trade Unions called a demonstration back in 1970 during a Springbok rugby tour of Ireland, and there was a massive turnout across Dublin, led by the trade union movement. At the same time, there was a match to be held in Limerick in Thomond Park. The Limerick Trades Council called another demonstration, a massive turnout of workers against the apartheid regime. It's a long time ago, and I was on both of these demonstrations, but it's a long time ago, but it is a lesson and shows us what can be achieved and the effects that you can have on the regime in Israel in the same way as we affected the regime in South Africa. So I want to thank you, Jabu, and the other comrades for their contributions. The purpose of this meeting is to examine ways in which trade unions can take action. The best form of action is directly, as Jack referred to there, in the workplace, where you choose to handle goods for South Africa or from South Africa. The BDS is another direct form of action which people can take, and trade unions should start to take action on these companies. For example, no union should employ Hewlett-Packard computers or technology or hardware in their offices. That's trade union action which is required. And there are also other areas of insurance and finance that unions should not publicize on their journals for their membership. So there's a few immediate actions can be taken on the BDS by trade unions, and this meeting is trying to focus on what action unions can take. So thanks again, Jabu, for organising the meeting, and so far it's been an immense success. It's very educational and very illustrative of what's actually happening, and also the kind of possibilities open to us of the actions that we can take as activists in the trade union movement internationally.
Thank you, Finbar. The aim is to really coordinate actions, but also to strengthen our resolve and to look into our historical, wins that we've had. We've got a lot of challenges with Israel in terms of the support that they have, but it still doesn't stop us as trade unions to actually inflict the same type of actions that were felt by the South African regime until it capitulated. Otherwise, it wouldn't have shifted. So I'll move the question. I'll move to Steve and ask for his contribution. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, well, thank you, Comrade Jabu and David, for organizing this international meeting. I think we need more meetings like this, where we can come in together internationally and discuss and strategize unification of the world working class, because really that's what it takes to smash Israeli apartheid regime, like the South African apartheid regime. So there are a couple of things I think that need to be looked at. One is that the way we're going to shut down Israel is to shut down all trade and all movement of goods to Israel. And right now, the Zim is still shipping to Britain. Zim is still shipping to Australia. Zim is still shipping to the East Coast. Zim is still shipping to South Africa. And when we talk about apartheid Israel, they get support from the government of South Africa, from the ANC, which allowed the takeover of Clover, a Zionist company owned by the Wertheim family, which is still operating in South Africa. They're profiting in South Africa, the Zionist regime directly from Clover. So I think one of the demands internationally should be that the government should take over, expropriate Clover, and turn it over to the workers to run. They shouldn't be helping South Africa, or helping Israel, really, the Zionist regime, profit from apartheid. And Clover and Wertheim family actually have farms in Palestine that they've taken and are selling product to South Africa, dairy product. So that's one issue I think that needs to be an international campaign for expropriation of Zionist property around the world that would directly challenge the apartheid regime. The other thing is there's some effort in the Bay Area. There's a Labor for Palestine had a meeting of 300 workers, and there's action on May Day, this coming May Day, and organizing an international boycott on May Day of the Zionist regime, and focus May Day on global action to shut down Israel. I think that would be an important part of connecting May Day and the struggle of working class internationally. And the other thing is, I think we need an international conference, and I wrote to Newt, maybe in July when we have Labor Fest in San Francisco, having an international labor conference on Palestine, bringing together workers around the world. one of the major obstacles in the United States is that the AFL-CIO openly supports Zionism. They're affiliated to the Histadrut, which is a racist trade union federation. They still have those ties, and they're blocking any action. The AFL-CIO, although it said it's for a ceasefire, it's still supporting military and economic aid to Israel by the US government. So I think we're going to have an education campaign in the American working class and the unions to break relationships with the Histadrut and to support direct labor action globally against that regime. The fact of the matter is that regime wouldn't last a week if all workers around the world shut down the airline flights, shut down the shipping, shut down communication links. And that is what we have to do. And the lesson that we have from South Africa is a mass movement can do that internationally, that workers have the power to isolate a apartheid regime and the Zionist regime if they take that action. But as I said, it's a political struggle of education. We had a rally on the 24th of February. There was an International Day of Action with the Italians who've also taken action, Italian dock workers and others, logistics workers in Italy and workers in other countries. So I think we have to build towards that. And on Women's Day, we had an action. The Palestinian Journalist Union called for an International Day of Action to support Palestinian journalists. Over 124 have been killed, murdered, 16 women. So we had an action in San Francisco at the San Francisco Chronicle. But we have to develop with the Palestinian unions direct links so that they can speak to workers around the world. And we have this technology, Zoom, like we're using now, in which they can reach out and speak directly. I think that is the power, really, of the working class using these communication tools to build direct links with journalists, with dock workers, with airline workers, all kinds of workers coming together. And I see that as building an international working class movement to smash the apartheid regime, to bring back the Palestinians to Palestine so that they can take over the country as a Palestine, and also link up the world working class internationally. And that would be a historic development. And it's a fight against fascism as well, because fascism is growing internationally. And that is something we have to look at. The other thing is, I think we need an international campaign. Maybe we can launch it here to defend the comrades in Britain who've been arrested. And that is very important. It's unknown. There's no publicity in the United States about the arrest of these comrades. So I think we do need an international campaign because they were fighting against Zionism in Britain. And I know the British government, like the German government, want to crush any political opposition to the Zionist regime. So maybe we can start here an international campaign for these comrades and take it up in the labor movement around the world, that they need to be defended, and maybe actions at the British consulates around the world, the day of action, global day of action against these comrades and for the Palestinian workers. That would be a very important development.
Thank you, Steve, for that call out for international action. One of the biggest fights that the anti-apartheid won on was the fact that it was an international struggle. It was an international struggle that was joined by artists. It was joined by so many different aspects of our lives. We are calling now to see a movement that will be coordinated on such a scale that has never been seen before. The Palestinian struggle movement, as it is grown a lot of what we call power on the streets. But what we need to see now is more boycotts. We've seen a lot of campaigns against banks like Barclays, who are funding the Israeli armed machine by supporting Israel with money to pay for arms. So we need that coordinated struggle, and that call out is really within this meeting ethos, really. So I would like to ask Athens to come in. There's somebody in Athens, then Greg. Thank you.
There, yeah. Hi, I'm Luisa. I'm from Romania, and I'm representing the Socialist Action Group. And we wanted to share with you some experience that we had in our country. So Elbit Systems, it's an Israeli arms company, and they have, I think, 3 or 4 factories in Romania. A lot of them, a lot of people don't know this. And a few weeks ago, there was actually a disclosure that the drones that attack Gaza are basically being made in Romania. And there was a boycott, and the trade unions have actually called for a leave for people to leave their jobs. And we, our group, we have published an appeal for those 4 factories plus another one which has a sort of subcontracting contract with Elbit Systems to stop making those devices and those things that basically fuel the genocide. And in addition to this, a few of our comrades have been to a trade union Congress 2 weeks ago, and even though those trade unions are not directly involved in those industries, they have actually called for an appeal and for a solidarity towards Palestinian victims. And there is a growing movement as well in Romania for boycotting, for sabotaging, for stopping production. And we would be more than happy to maybe start coordinating with you guys. I think it would be great if we actually started doing something for this. So yeah, thanks, and yeah.
Thank you, Marina. I hope I got your name correct. Thank you. Yes, we have to intensify the coordination in terms of our country so that we can plan a coordinated movement that can really hit hard to the Zionist machine. Greg, can I have you next, please?
Yes, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I don't want to talk about the history. There was a fabulous history in Liverpool, and people can read about it, but I want to just focus on the situation we're in now with Palestine. It could be that within the next week or so, there could be a ground invasion of Rafah. We can't take the point of view that we're going to organize a conference in 6 months' time, or, set a day of action in 3 months. We have to think about how we are going to respond if that ground invasion goes ahead right now. The second thing is that I think that the appeal from the Palestinian unions was focused on the arms trade. It was a very important appeal. But actually in Liverpool, what we needed was a similar appeal that wasn't limited to the arms trade. And this is what Steve, I think, was referring to a moment ago. The actual problem in front of us in terms of the ports is a boycott of trade with Israel, not finding the individual arms components, which is a very difficult problem. And in Liverpool, we were not able to do it. Although we have the contacts, we couldn't find any arms. And I'm not convinced there were any arms going through Liverpool. However, if the appeal had been to stop trade with Israel, there would have been a lot of things that we could have tried to do. Now, we can't really do that in advance of the Palestinian movement. So I would say that that is a top priority, is to get the word back to the trade union movement in Palestine that right now is the right time to put out an appeal for a general boycott of trade with Israel, not limited to finding the individual components of individual arms. In any case, the arms can be flown. The arms can also be handled on military cargo, which is almost impossible for us to intercept. So anyway, that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to say is a very general comment about, well, what is the significance of the boycott movement, even if it is a labor a labor-led boycott, which is what all of us are focused on and why we're having this call today. In my opinion, it's secondary. It is the most important thing that we can do, but it is not the most important determinant of what is going to happen. And I believe that is also the case if you look at the history of South Africa. In my opinion, the reason why apartheid fell was because of the incredible upsurge of union organizing inside South Africa. And none of us outside were able to play a role comparable to that. So when we think about what we're doing, yes, we have to fight as hard as we possibly can to impose this labor action, but we shouldn't kid ourselves that history simply depends on us. It depends at least as much on what happens in Palestine. So let's not overblow our own role in this, but let's do the best we possibly can. And let's really put the word through to the Palestinian unions that this is the right time to appeal for a general boycott of all trade. Thanks.
Thank you, Greg. I understand that the Palestinians have to lead on this, but we do have to take into consideration that the Palestinians at the moment, a lot of them are under the rubble and they are facing a really heavy machinery. So we have to really stand in solidarity and call out for action. Obviously, if the Palestinian movements meet us halfway with this, my take on this is that we have been marching, we have shown solidarity with the Palestinian movement. What we want to see now is an intensification on seeing something that would make the Zionist regime shift their attitude in terms of the boycotting of their services. Joe, and then I also have Ntogo Zombele has joined us, so I'd like you to come in after Joe. Thank you. Josko, would you come in, please?
Hi, thanks for having me today. It's good to see everybody. I know some of the conveners of WIN, Roger Silverman, Jimmy Kelly from many years ago. It's good to meet new people who are in this network. Myself, I work with Newt. I'm a new member of the Dock Workers Union on the West Coast for many years before, and still now I worked in the maritime industry as a seaman. And the last speaker, I very much agree with the principle that when we're talking about stopping the flow of aid to Israel, it is very difficult to say that we are going to be the ones in the first world countries, particularly here in the United States, that are going to actually target direct military aid going there. Because I know from experience working as a seaman, these things are very, very complicated. Arms get shipped all over the place. You might think it's going to Israel, but it's going to Saudi Arabia. It's getting traded there. Saudi Arabia is then giving, it's very complex. I think we need to work with people in other unions, the logistics industry. Labor actions are not going to be like the same type. We're not going to play the same role as dock workers that we did in the 1980s with the Ned Lloyd Kimberley. You see Zim containers in our terminals, but you don't see the Zim ships. They're going through third parties. There's a lot of research and work that needs to be done. This is something that I've done in these actions, working, my experience as a seaman, being able to identify where things are going. I could get into some things that have happened, and I'll just say briefly, back in 2010, there was a Zim ship here, an actual Zim ship that came in that changed what it's called its AIS transponder, which is like a maritime identification. And this was something we had to figure out because it changed the name of the ship on its transponder, and the Pilots Association cooperated with the Zim shipping agent to deceive the public as to where the ship was going. So these things are very complex, and I hope that you all have my contact information, and we can continue to work together on doing whatever we can in our power. As people who have some control on the docks, as dock workers, seamen, logistics workers, clerks, anybody who can share information about these things and work together to make things happen. That's all I got to say for right now. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for everybody's contribution.
Thank you, Joe, for your contribution. Can I ask Sister Dogozo to come in? Dogozo Mpele?
Hi, greetings to all of you. Firstly, I'm a beneficiary of international solidarity actions. So I wish to thank all of you, all of the unions and individuals across the world who supported us as South Africans when we were oppressed. Thank you. My liberation came through because of your sacrifice. We've been trying to look at the similarities between South Africa and Palestine. In South Africa, the political parties were banned, so the trade unions took up the space and became the voice for the banned political parties. In Palestine, it is difficult for both political formations and trade unions to exist. And the fragmentation that Retusa also spoke about, we are experiencing it in South Africa, but also I think the fragmentation is quite obvious in Palestine. But what we need to do as supporters of Palestinians is to find creative ways in which we can keep Palestine on the agenda. Let me just say things that I have thought about that I think South African trade unions can do. I've worked for many of them, and I know they own big buildings in some strategic parts of big cities. If they could just wrap their buildings with the Palestinian flag, that will keep the message going. But also, if we organize a group of 10 workers every day to rotate at different embassies, we go to the UK embassy, all you need is 10 people, then you don't have to ask for a permit because it's a permit, because it's a picket, and you picket there, you highlight the genocide, you have the ceasefire message on, other people will be at the US embassy, others will be at the German embassy, though the Germans would want us to believe that they are not part of supporting Palestine, but they have shown by their non-action that they are. But also one of the areas that trade unions could strengthen is to refuse to be cornered into dealing only with bread and butter issues. Your context should be free political space. So where there is no freedom, you cannot talk bread and butter issues. So you fight for political freedom and liberation for the Palestinian people, then they can fight for the rest. Another issue that is quite disturbing for me is we seem to have, not all of us, but to some extent we've forgotten how powerful the cultural boycott was. I think it was a comrade from Dublin who referred to the SA rugby. We need to talk to individual artists. We need to speak to golfers. We need to speak to popular DJs to refuse to go and perform in Israel. Then as an individual, I need to check my own consumerism. Am I still buying Coke? And if I'm buying Coke, why? Am I still walking into Starbucks? And why am I still walking into Starbucks? Don't I understand that there's the blood of the Palestinian people? So we need the boycott works better when it starts at an individual level. Many of you resisted our juiciest fruits, our wines, and you hit the pocket of the apartheid government. We can still do that. The unions in South Africa also have an advantage in that they negotiate at a macro level. They need to demand a trade embargo with Israel. It should be on the agenda all the time. We should, besides refusing, we should also approach the chambers of industries. We should approach business owners and say, don't stock the following goods. We've got the list. If we form ourselves into little groups and say, no longer buy this product, don't buy HP, don't distribute HP parts, we will hit the pockets of the Israeli regime. So that is my contribution. And thank you once again for my freedom.
Thank you, Ntokozo. A comrade from, next comrade from NUMSA and former Satau, a long time ago. She was part of the boycott of the Zim ship, and it is fantastic to have her here and practical as always, and it's given us a lot to think about. I have Woody again, and then I would like to invite all the other guest speakers to come back and just to give a summing up, and then we can then close the meeting. Woody, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Comrade Jabu. I just wanted two short comments. I think, I just want to pick up something on what Comrade Pakis said. And he did make a comment about the kind of political organization and amongst the trade unions currently, and I think post 94, particularly post 94. Yes, and I think he's absolutely right. There's been a weakening of these unions, even those that want to make big, bold political statements. There's been a weakening of these unions, and I think this has come about as a result of what we're seeing is that this is always creeping in, is this thing of business unionism, and I think that has very much to do with unions becoming too involved in investment companies and spending far less time in organizing the shop floor. And we're seeing this, and I think it's contributed to weaknesses that it's contributed. But that's just one reason for the weakness of unions. There are other reasons post 94 as well, and that is the fact that many of them have been corporatists. They believe now and they are totally sold that you can win everything on, through social dialogue. You win some things, you can't win everything. And of course, there are other reasons of, that the worker control has been undermined, and this internal union democracy, as a whole, has been undermined. And the result is that they service less servicing of workers and more time spent on pursuing their, let's just say, their business interests. So I think that's important because it does play a role in how we organize and just what kind of strength we can galvanize to support the Palestinians. But I just want to pick up something that I think the General Federation of Palestinian unions, when they called out to the international community, they did list a whole menu there's a whole list of menu, at least, on calling on the international trade union movements for support. And it was all revolving around the arms trade. But one of the subsections of those demands and those calls was that you have to look at not just the companies that are manufacturing these arms and exporting these arms, but look along the supply chain. And along the supply chain, you would have different companies supplying different components, and that eventually end up in these big companies manufacturing arms. So these along the supply chains, there are many, many companies that are complicit in this whole arms trade. And it's not just, just big names that are involved in aerospace and so on, but it's along the supply chain, which I agree with one of the previous speakers when he said this has become very difficult, and that perhaps it's better just to have a call for a global trade embargo against Israel, and that's probably a more practical way to go about it. The last comment I want to make is that and I think when we spoke about these coalitions, I think the Palestinians have been well organized here. Globally, we've seen. What we've seen is that there's been unprecedented levels of global protest in support of the Palestinian people, and I think you had movements like the Black Lives Matters, but coming from within Palestine itself, Arab feminist organizations that refused just to look in a narrow sense but to say, look, more broadly, that the feminists and the Arab feminist movement was totally against this kind of colonial oppression. So they look at it very, very politically. And then there was the, so that came from the feminist movement, but I think internationally and outside of Palestine, yes, involvement of youth organizations and even it's even drawn, and this is why I said this whole this whole wave of protests has been so unprecedented that it's even brought in climate justice movements, and it's also brought in like the Extinction Rebellion (XR), and I think this is also so important. So this broad coalition of forces are not just limited to labor, but it sort of broadens out to include, and the fact that it could bring in a climate and a social climate justice movement, like and a very radical and a very young radical group of activists. So it's important, and I think one of the ways, and just to conclude, is that this month, and what this month is that the Free Palestine Coalition has declared March 24 as the month of action. And I think there's the trade union solidarity, there's a whole lot of webinars and so on. So I think March is pretty much an open series events. And I think it's a chance for international movements to really get involved and to make the kind of contributions that they're making here, and to cement this, because now is the time. I don't think in the history there's been this kind of wave of support, this unprecedented wave of support for the people of Palestine and their struggle. Thanks, Jabu.
Thank you, Wood. Yes, the call from Steve as well to have these type of meetings on a regular basis where we gather together and discuss actions and what we're doing in terms of international coordination is really, really important. It's part of why I thought we are demonstrating on the streets in our localities. We are demonstrating on the streets in the UK. We are highlighting the wrongs of banks like Barclays, but what is missing really is coordinating action internationally. As Sister was saying around the cultural boycott, we had a really fantastic song where people, musicians gathered together to say they weren't gonna play in Sun City. I'm sure a lot of you can still remember that song. And there were also lots of boycott, what you call movies, highlighting the issues around apartheid. So we need really a cultural movement that is really going to take this up in terms of action against those, what is happening in Palestine. We do have a huge presence of the social media, but what we need now is coordinated action that can really kind of galvanize support from different industries and from different sectors. I would like to now again invite David and other guest speakers to come back just to sum up on the meeting before we close. So I'll begin with David Hampson. Thank you.
Jabu, marvelous discussion. Thanks all the comrades who've contributed. I know many more would have wanted to have contributed. Jack, I'm sure you have a long schedule of things that we must do. I liked your categorical imperative. I mean, what are we going to do? And how are the trade unions going to be committed? And particularly the points which Ratusa made, which shows the challenges which are out there and a series of obstacles to overcome, because we want the action to to peak. I mean, to start growing, to be able to peak in terms of the action which is taking place on the ground. It's absolutely horrifying. All of us, in a sense, are stalled in a way because of the immensity of the destruction we see in front of our eyes, and yet it's not stopping. It is an extraordinary period that we're living through, and it's a challenge to us all. Can I develop some of the points which have been made? Jabu, you've made a stand I know that although you haven't put it all there, you've taken a stand in the Oxford City Council and put forward resolutions there in terms of action, boycott action, against apartheid Israel. Other councillors I know throughout Britain have been taking action. Somehow this is not well known, although it should be better known. And we do need to have some record of this action, because it really gets to, in a sense, the heart of the matter. These are the Labour leadership, the Tory leadership, are those very leaders who are giving the support right now. And the political pressure through the councils, through the unions, through the communities, in every possible way needs to be mounted. And we need to have a record of this. Jabu, you've sent me communications so that we know that it happened there in Oxford. We also need to be able to pull that together. I'm sure we've seen the same in action in Newham and the like. We need to see, and I was hoping that out of this discussion today, we would maybe see a momentum, at the level of the councillors. We know that so many have resigned against the Labour Party. How to take that forward is a question we need to, to work on, to record, so that we can reflect on this and be able to take it further. Then we've had a number of suggestions, quite a good debate, about whether it's possible to stop arms support, the arms being transported to Israel. We've had a record of action from the Indian water workers. We had hoped to have them with us tonight, but that's not been possible, although we've opened up some communications, which I think we could take forward again. But we need to document every action, because none of this is in the headlines of the bourgeois press. Even when we hear about it, it's maybe through the social media, just in a scattered manner of something of that kind. We need to build a record of action, and particularly against, if I could label it, Zim shipping. Because in South Africa, we've attempted action at times. We've had commitment, particularly from the Durban dock workers, that, some of whom have spoken tonight, others who've actually been listening in. I think Comrade Gomede and Kosi, I think you've been in and out, a little bit shy to speak, but we've had Durban dock workers who've been committed to such action, coming in and listening to this discussion. And we need to be able to record and to be able to take this further. Zim shipping is one of the big shipping lines internationally, and it is the old issue of trade, which Greg has pointed out, is really what we've got to go for, to be able to mobilize the maritime sector and to be able to get the dock workers into action, as well. As before, we know that the ILW, the comrades, particularly in Local 10, San Francisco, have given the world the lead, and we'll be following up with you, comrades, and see what we can do.
Thank you.
And then Steve's raised a number of points, which I think we could note and see how we can take forward. I mean, May Day seems a decade away right now, when we see, the speed at which destruction is taking place. But we need to think, how do we celebrate? How do we commemorate, in a sense, May Day under these conditions of war and genocide? How do we bring to the attention of ordinary trade union members the need to take action, and we know it will be an issue. It's not something which is going to pass away. We see that every day there's a cancellation of a ceasefire. It's been put off, and we wonder, how on earth we can put the brakes on such a movement, and yet it's possible. I think Greg and Steve have raised the question of workers worldwide taking action. And if we did take action, we would actually stop this momentum right in its tracks. We would actually give hope to the Palestinian people and be able to take it forward. So, Jabu, I'll end there, but I just want us not just to have said things, but to have been able to record what we're doing and take it forward. Yeah.
Thank you, David. Before I go back to the speakers, I've just seen one of my councillors who've resigned. I wonder if you should say a word. Shaista, can you hear me? I can see you're on. No, okay. Maybe she's gonna. Okay, can I go back to the speakers? If there are any of my Oxford councillors here, it would be great if you can just say a word about the action that you took in terms of the bold stand we made in our Oxford City Council. Can I go back to my guest speakers? David Newton, would you like to say something just as a closing point?
Well, I'm happy that we had this forum today, and sorry, I'm in this room now. I can't turn the camera on, but I think we thank you, Jabu, for doing this. I believe you spearheaded this, and it was enlightening, especially knowing what's going on the other side. Sometimes we get caught up in what we know here, but I learned a lot from what's going on around, even though I thought I knew, I didn't know some things. And what can we do to get this thing along and help each other and help the people?
Yeah. Thank you, David. Jack, would you care to say something?
Sure. Let me say, I think I'm probably the only one at this meeting that was participating in the 1984 anti-apartheid strike. And that was in San Francisco. Look, history is important because it's still relevant today, the lessons that we learned from that struggle years ago. Number one, when we conducted which was effectively a sympathy strike or a solidarity strike, that's illegal under US trade union laws. So we defied the government in doing that, and that wasn't easy. It was during the Reagan years, a very anti-union president, anti-communist as well. And not only did we go up against the government, but we went up against our own trade union leadership. The international president, in an arbitration in the midst of that strike, sided with the employers that what we were doing was illegal. And we knew it was illegal, but we stuck to our guns and we prevailed. So the strike did continue. So that's an important lesson because, you know, you have the Liverpool dockworkers are part of Unite now. And Sharon Graham, the general secretary, as far as I know, has not come out against the war yet. And I don't know which of the trade union bureaucracy has made a statement against it. But it's important that we understand that power flows from the rank and file at the point of production. So ports like Liverpool, if they took an action, could spread like wildfire throughout Unite. I wanted to also say about Joel's point about tracking that ship down in 2010 that came into the port of Oakland. In 2009, the trade union, the dock workers in Durban had an action against the Johanna Roos that's well publicized. Greg did a good job of that on his website, labornet.net. We took that action and made a resolution that it was exemplary and we should all follow that kind of job action in solidarity with the Palestinian people. So the following year, the Mavi Marmara flotilla was going to bring food aid and medical aid to Gaza. It was attacked by the IDF. 9 people were killed. And we used the fire of that, the impact, the outrage, to then implement a motion that we had commended the Durban dock workers for their action and called it exemplary. And we said, now is the time for us to refuse to work this ship coming in from Israel, Zimline ship. And we did. That was the first action, Joel, 2010, that a trade union has used its power at the point of production to protest the Israeli repression of Palestinians. So I just wanted to make those points. And I think what we need to do, if you're really serious about having an international action, is get the unions that have already taken actions, like the Belgian transport workers, like the Italian dock workers in Genoa, and the Barcelona dock workers. I will reach out to the Barcelona dock workers, but I really, I just think that that's what we need to do, is get the workers. When I keep saying the point of production, we live in a global capitalist world. The power that the working class has is to stop that trade, stop the production. And so that's what we have to try to do, is get unions in that are at the point of production, that nexus point of global trade. And hopefully there'll be more dock workers at the next union. And I'm not saying it's only dock workers that need to take action. The UAW has come out against the war, but they support a president who is making the war possible, shipping weapons to the Zionists. They also are a union that builds tanks. So we need to reach out to all the unions that are involved in the call by the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions. Don't build war material objects for the Israeli government, and don't transport them, don't handle them. And we need to have more unions like that here. So that's my main point, is we need to get other dock workers unions involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack, for that call out for the already existing unions who've led on these issues to lead again, so that the rest of us can see how it's done. It's really important that this action this fire does not die out. We need to keep fueling this action in terms of the crises that are unfolding in Gaza. As you know, it's not something that the Israeli government is willing to even give a little bit of air to the Palestinians. They are still intensifying their bombing and their carpet bombing of infrastructures like hospitals. So we really need strong action from the trade union movement. Before I go to my next speaker, and I would like to bring in one of my city councillors who was the first to resign with us in Oxford, England. Thank you, Shaista. Come in, please.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. And first of all, I'd just like to start by thanking Jabu for bringing us all together. Jabu is a formidable organizer and a woman who believes in solidarity, as we all know. So thank you, Jabu. I've been listening to the comments so far. I just want to thank everybody for their contributions. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the rising levels and mainstreaming of Islamophobia in the UK. We have a Prime Minister who came out of Downing Street 2 weeks ago and stood at a podium and talked about extremists taking over the country. And specifically, even though he didn't name Muslims, that's what he means. And he also is conflating Islamophobic Islamist extremism with pro-Palestinian supporters, who obviously are people of all faiths and none, and all backgrounds and none, an intergenerational group of people who are marching across cities across the world, but especially here in Europe, demanding an end to Israel's onslaught on Gaza. So I think it's really important that when we talk about trade unionism in particular, when my late dad came to this country from Pakistan as a working class young man, he was a member of the trade union for more than 30 years. He was a railway worker. And the solidarity that I saw the interracial solidarity growing up as a kid, and witnessing, going on protests and going to meetings with my dad, has sadly diminished. And I think we need to focus on bringing that back, and we need to focus on ensuring that our trade union movements are really pluralistic in understanding racism and how we counter it, and specifically Islamophobia. And the reason why I'm saying specifically Islamophobia is because there is a lack of understanding that this is a form of racism. So the many politicians, especially those on the right, say that Muslims are not a race and therefore Islamophobia is not racism. Well, as we know, Muslims are pathologized as a race, and the policies that have devastated the Middle East in the last 15, 16 years in particular of the so-called war on terror have wreaked absolute havoc, and they've been deeply racist and deeply anti-Arab and anti-Muslim. And I think we have to really call those things what they are. And we also need to connect this with the deeply hateful mainstreaming political rhetoric of the hatred against refugees and migrants, which is increasing everywhere in the world. And especially in Europe, we've got a swathe of right-wing politicians. Right-wing is a pleasant word. I think I should call them extremists, because that's what they are. They're not right-wing. And they are also connecting all of these issues together. So in the UK, for example, the government was very quick to create a Ukrainian refugee resettlement program, which is what it should do. Ukrainian people have every right to be safe and to flourish and to live with dignity. And when it comes to Palestine, nothing has been created. It's now 5 months since the onslaught on Gaza. And of course, we know we stand in solidarity with our Palestinian brothers and sisters. We understand that there is an attempt to remove the ones who still remain in Gaza out of the territory. So we're not suggesting that there should be some kind of blanket European operation to remove Palestinians from their land and bring them to Europe. But what we are saying is that where there are families in the city of Oxford, where I am with Jabu and whoever else might be on this call, because I'm on my phone and I can't see everyone on the screen, what we are saying is that there are people who are desperate to get their loved ones out of Gaza and make sure they can access medical treatment and have food and water and dignity. So I think these are very pertinent issues for the trade union movement. And I really would urge us as trade unionists and those who believe in the movement to ensure that we focus on this, and that we understand that these battle lines have been around for a very long time, but they're becoming more and more entrenched. And I've just actually got off a call from someone who is quite a senior advisor in UK politics, and they've told me that what they said this evening is that there is a lack of understanding of Islamophobia as a phenomena, but there's also a complete disregard for the lives of British Muslims. And I'll just wrap up by saying that I'm sure you're aware that George Galloway won a parliamentary seat. I think it was last week in a local Rochdale by-election. And George Galloway is a controversial character. There's many issues many of us on the left have with him, but let's put that to one side. When he won, the vast majority of people who voted for him were Muslim, but there's also a vast different group of people of different racial backgrounds who voted for him. But the reason why he's become a problem for the UK government is because he was specifically focusing on British Muslims and the vilification of them and the alienation and the disenfranchisement of them. And so this is why he has become such a sore for the UK government, and also for the very extreme right-wing media in this country. They are connecting his win with some sort of attempt to suggest that the Muslims, inverted commas, are taking over. So I think we have to be vigilant, but we have to be more than vigilant. We've got to be vocal about this, and we've got to work out how we as a movement are going to address this, and how we're going to make sure that in addressing it, that we don't speak for people and communities, that we work with people and communities, and that we ensure that we platform the voices of people and communities who feel safe enough to speak, because many people don't. So that's really what I wanted to raise here, and to say that our movement has to be intersectional. And I don't think we're very good at fully understanding what that means. And that's okay, because we're still building a movement. And we also have to make sure that when we say we're anti-racist, then we really are anti-racist, and we are striving to be as fully anti-racist as we possibly can. And we cannot also discount the linkages with refugees and migrants, particularly in Europe, and the policies of European governments towards Gaza in particular, and Palestine. So I'll stop there, and just again, Jabu, thank you for bringing us together.
Thank you, Shaista. And I was hoping that you mention our fight to have the Palestinian flag fly on our Oxford Council chambers, which is something that we've been trying to intensify. But we've had 2 great wins. We've had the motion on the ceasefire, which was unanimously supported. We've had the BDS motion as well, which was unanimously supported. So we are making wins, and we will carry on fighting for the Palestinian cause. Thank you. And can I now have Anna, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Comrades Jabu and Shaista, also for your own efforts in resigning in protest. I think the union speakers have really said it all. There's not much for me to add. As Comrades Woody and Jack have pointed out, it's going to be necessary for all the unions to get on board and stop the arms trade all the way along the supply chain. You know, this will take some time to organize, but as Comrade Greg Dropkin has pointed out, there's a very imminent Israeli invasion of Rafah coming very soon. And we know that the Palestinians have moved in tens of thousands right up to the border wall with Egypt and are living in tents there. I mean, we also need as a movement to say something about the actions of the regime of Egypt, which collaborates with Israel. They have currently lined up more than 40 tanks along the border in case any Palestinians manage to break through. As you might remember, it was around about 2008 when I think Hamas blew a hole in the border so that Palestinians could get through and go into Egypt and buy basic essential items. That was when they were already living under an Israeli siege. So, I mean, I think that this meeting is great, and we'll need to intensify and speed up all of our efforts very, very soon, very urgently, because what is about to happen probably over the next week is a massacre by Israel on a much larger scale than we've already seen already. But thank you so much, Comrade Jabu, for organizing this.
Have we lost Jabu?
Jabu? Yeah.
I can't see Jabu.
No,
Oh,
well, look,
hello. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I've just got some noise here. Before I bring in Pakis, can I have Dave say something quickly? Dave, yes.
Thank you, Jabu. Dave from the Oxford area. We have been doing protests not only in the city of Oxford itself, but in small towns around Oxford. It is very frustrating for some people who think that there's no way they can protest about Israel if they're not at work, if they're not in trade unions, or not in positions of power. But the one thing that they can do, and we have seen doing, surprisingly number of people who do not organize in political protests have been coming out on vigils, on pickets, and showing the calls for the ceasefire, for boycott, for the ending of apartheid, and so on. And it's surprising how many people can come out in this way. It's another way of putting pressure on the local authorities and the government. Even school students are doing it now. And I think this is one thing that's novel because of the growth of social media. It wasn't possible, it wasn't a phenomenon during the years of the anti-apartheid struggle, which I remember very well. And it's an additional thing that can be done as well as the methods that have been discussed this evening. So congratulations to Jabu for the stand she's taken. We're going to support her as much as we can. And also to Shaista, and well done for organising this meeting, which I've learned an awful lot from. I'm glad it's being recorded because there are people that we notified who couldn't actually attend, but they have asked if they can access the recording later on. So Jabu, if you can send out some information on where they can access the recording, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Can I quickly move on to Pakis just as a closing remark? I think Woody, since we did close, I'll leave that one. So Pakis, please. Is Pakis still here? Okay. Right. Okay. I will go on to basically we've had a call out for our comrades here, Carol Buxton and Dave Buxton, who were arrested in London, Newham. We would like to build a solidarity call out for them. They were arrested because apparently they were challenging one of their councillors in a council chamber. So I would like for us to really highlight this issue, because what is happening now, they are starting to form tactics where they're going to crush the movement, the Palestinian movement, by isolating individuals and arresting them. So this is really important that they are supported by this movement, and we show solidarity for their plight. Thank you. It's now 17:57 UK time. Unless there's anything else, I would like to, or I think Pam wants to say something before we close the meeting. Pam?
Yeah, just to say, people are asking about the recording. It will go on the Win YouTube channel shortly after the meeting, and I'll send Jabu the link to that, and then you can circulate that round, and anybody who's missed a lot of the meeting or wants to watch bits of it again can do. So that's what will happen with that. Just the other thing we always say at the end of the meeting about next week's meeting when you finish the discussion. And next week we have a man speaking on the Iranian elections. A man is in the meeting. I wonder if you just call him in, Jabu, just to outline what he's going to talk about.
Okay, Aman, are you here? Oh, he said.
Yes, I am. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
It's just a very brief, as Pam said. First of all, thank you very much for today's meeting. I thought it was a brilliant meeting. Next week is going to be on the issue of Iran. As you all, I'm sure, are aware, after all of the protests that took place last year following the Women Life Freedom movement, there have been an upheaval in the country across everywhere. Hundreds and thousands of protest actions have taken place just during this year. And the situation is quite dire politically and economically. On the one hand, we have the scenario of the Islamic Republic actually going through one answer only, and that is suppression, arrest, torture, executions. All of them are record numbers. And last week there was the issue of elections, which turned out to be, according to even the official news, to be the smallest number of participation in it. Given all of that, and especially in the background of what is happening in the Middle East and the position of the Islamic Republic, the next week meeting is going to be discussion of the issues of the current events, an update on what is going on, and obviously, as I said, within the context of what is actually happening in the Middle East as a whole. In the meeting, it would be myself talking, and I believe Morad would be talking as well. That's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Aman. I'd like to thank all of our guests who came today to give an insight on how we can draw parallels with the trade unions, how apartheid was fought in South Africa, and how we can fight the genocide that is unfolding right in front of our eyes. And just to say to everyone that came in solidarity, we really we are also touched by what is happening in Palestine, and we will not give up on Palestinian. As our great Nelson Mandela said, our struggles with Palestine are intertwined. Our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestine. So we really must keep the movements going, must keep the movements going for what is happening in Palestine, and the call out to really really start taking actions around boycotts in our different aspects of life. Thank you very much, everyone, and I hope this is not the last meeting, and hopefully we will have a much better sort of organizing for the future. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. In solidarity, Amandla.
Right.
Hey, Joe.
Amandla. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jabu.
Thanks.
Thank you,
David.
Jabu.
Bye, Greg. Bye, Steve.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
Bye, Anna. So good to see you. Bye, Tukozo.
Bye all.
Solidarity. Solidarity.
See you, Steve.
Okay, take care.
Mm.